and the Francophone. Also have the Global Social Norms and Agency Learning Collaborative, but also one in South Asia. What do? We document and share experiences. We strengthen capacity. We improve practice through partnerships, but also we co-create social norms, resources, and products. And these could be accessed through our different, through the website, the Align website. We shall give details around that. A link within the chat so that if you're interested in accessing such resources, you could visit our website and look through the kind of resources we have. They are free of charge. You can download quite several of them. But also, if you need further support on how to use them, you can reach out to us and we provide that kind of support. In regard to the Eastern Africa Agency Social and Gender Norms Learning Collaborative, this particular network covers Eastern Africa countries, including Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, the DRC, and Ethiopia. And currently, the ELC is working in partnership with the Agency for All project. Our presenter today shall give us some highlights around what this project is about. But in brief, it generates evidence on the influence of agency in shifting social and gender norms using SBC approaches and frameworks. Okay, so why are we here today? What are our objectives? We want to develop a deeper understanding of individual and collective agency and empowerment specific to sexual and reproductive health to inform the next phase of the intervention. The other objective is to understanding the link between agency, empowerment, sexual and reproductive health, and HIV prevention. The third objective is designing effective indicators and frameworks for real-time monitoring, evaluation, and learning of agency and empowerment-focused social behavior change campaigns in sexual and reproductive health and HIV prevention. So the presenter will provide us with findings of this particular study, but these findings have to be translated into designing effective indicators and frameworks that shall be used for agency and empowerment-focused SBC campaigns in sexual and reproductive health and HIV prevention. In this particular presentation, our agenda has 4 items. One is around about the Agency for All project. So the presenter will tell us about the Agency for All project. We also provide an overview of the study and methodology. Item 3, they will present the findings. And basically there, they will focus on the emerging concept of individual and collective agency. And then lastly, they will speak about the measurement challenges. And after their presentation, we shall have a preliminary discussion where if you have questions, if you have comments, then you could, you'll have a chance to ask questions to the presenter, but also make additional questions, pose different questions that can really help the presenter to really focus their study. I want to introduce to you the different presenters. I'm using presenters intentionally. Yeah. We have Alex Kagaha. Alex Kagaha is part of the Agency for All project. He's the research manager for the Agency for All project. We also have Pobu Kuluchi, who is the director for the Agency for All project. But also we have Lisa from Shujaz Inc. From Kenya. Let me call upon Alex Kagaha to take us through this presentation, and he will be calling on other presenters. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aloysius, for this wonderful opportunity. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. We are delighted to have this opportunity of sharing the findings to you. And Paul and I will be speaking to you about what we have to present around the concept of agency. Next slide. Next slide. So I think I begin by offering some insights about the project Just for All, whose project goal is to improve and sustain the health and agency for individuals and communities. And so by doing that, we aim to advance their health across the different sectors, and particularly focusing on outcomes that are related to family planning, sexual and reproductive health, maternal, neonatal, and child health, nutrition, and HIV/AIDS prevention. So the purpose of this project is essentially to generate locally led, equitable partnerships and innovative research to generate new evidence on understanding agency and empowerment and individuals' abilities to convert their intentions into concrete actions within the health and SPC programming. Next. So Agency for All is comprised of different actors, and here is a summary of different partners who are in this consortium. Of course, there are those that are located within Africa, like Mackay University. We have Max Boxology. Then we also have other partners who are away from Africa, like somebody. You have the University of California, San Diego, USAID, and many others. So all these different actors comprise the Agency for All, whose major goal I've talked about is that of generating evidence and then being able to translate this evidence into supporting implementation of interventions. Next slide. Yeah, so in this particular study that we are presenting to you was a study that was conducted by 3 institutions specifically. That's Mackay University, Shujaz Media Organization, which is based in Kenya, and then UCSD, the University of California, San Diego. So together, the aim of this study was, again, as we talked about, is just to improve and sustain the health and agency of individuals and communities, advancing health and cross-sector development outcomes in the fields that I mentioned before. And this is always done through locally led equitable partnerships that facilitate innovative research to ensure that we generate robust evidence that can be used into enabling different communities to convert their intentions into action within the fields of health and SPC programming. So specifically, this study aimed to explore, describe, and operationalize the concept of agency and empowerment as understood by younger Kenyans to inform the design and implementation of social behavior change media campaigns on SRH and HIV prevention in Kenya. So in terms of composition of the team, again, we have this Shujaz implements the intervention, the media intervention, And so it has multimedia programming intervention that seeks to improve youth agency, sexual and reproductive health and HIV/AIDS prevention. And then Makere, which actually is responsible for technical guidance in generating this evidence that you are presenting tonight. And then USSD, which is the prime research oversight and guidance unit. So in trying to generate this evidence, we try to gather the evidence using conversations around the concept of good life. We use the concept of good life as understood by young people in Kenya. And why did we consider it important for good life as a concept for entry? It's simply because the concept of agency is quite abstract, seen in its isolation. So we want to target something that is kind of has some kind of physical characteristics or meaning to which young people can try to explain the presence or absence of the concept of agency. So we seek to understand what good life means for young people and understand what could motivate them to seek and achieve the good life. We also seek to understand the barriers they face while seeking good life. Next slide. So in terms of what did we do? So we did, what we did is that, first of all, we are in this kind of partnership. We have a study that is spanning more than 3 years. And so we are having different phases of learning about agency among young people in Kenya. So the first stage is the stage of conducting the formative research. And then we have longitudinal panel surveys, in-depth interviews, and then WhatsApp experimental groups. So in conducting, next slide. In conducting this formative study, we phased out our activities into two. The first phase involved the collection of primary data, which is both qualitative and quantitative. And for qualitative data, we collected it through 8 focus group discussions with young people, male and female, aged between 18 and 24. We also held 10 IDIs with young people, both male and female, aged between 18 and 24. And then we also identified those young people who were identified as positive deviants. In addition, we also held interviews with the adult professionals who engage with young people of the age mentioned as part of their occupation. We also conducted the SMS survey with Suja's media funds of about 4,000 randomly selected Suja's funds registered in SMS database that is held by Suja's. So after collecting that data, then we had phase 2 that involved clarification, verification, and expansion of findings. So to do this, we had participatory engagements with young people through consultative engagements. We specifically held 2 design thinking sessions with young people, both female and female, in which we verified the findings from the qualitative data collection phase that we generated. And so specifically, all the data came from young people who are aged between 18 and 24. So here we begin to share with you what we have as the findings that emerged from that formative study phase we study. We present our findings in terms of 2 components. One around the concept of individual agency, and then 2 around the concept of collective agency. The findings that we generate from the study in terms of individual agency, next slide. In terms of individual agency, we asked young people to try and help us understand what to them a person with agency looks like in terms of the characteristics. And their responses were classified according to their gender, If you look at the slide that is before you, on the right is the male and on the left is the female. So the perspective from the females indicate that the persons with agency are those ones who normally exhibit focus. They're always focused and they have self-respect, are well-disciplined. They are consistent in what they do and they are God-fearing. In summary, these kind of attributes to them define what a person with agency looks like. Yet, if you look at the side of the male participants, their concept of agency is reflected in a person having characteristics of hard work, being able to make decisions, being patient and loving at the same time. So from a male perspective, agency embodies also the concept of self-confidence first as key to the success. Below are also some of the quotes that indicate to us what young people are telling us. If you want to succeed, you need God's favor, even if you are hardworking. But without God's favor, you are nothing. So intimately, young female participants noted a key relationship between their individual lives and the lives of the invisible forces that they believed in, the life of God. Now, also, she has freedom to do what she wants and be able to make decisions, choose for herself a man and bring something on the table. Next slide. So those are part of the characteristics that we mentioned above. We tried to and analyze all the findings that we generated from young people around the concept of agency. And through that activity, we came up with this diagram that illustrates the core components that young people consider as the components of agency. There are 5 key elements that were considered. One is the principle of critical consciousness. Second, the principle of the element of self-efficacy. And third, the element of conviction of choice, act. And then lastly, we had the element of resist. So the illustration here indicates how the different elements are interconnected as in order for a person to exhibit agency. So in essence, in their mindset, all the different elements needed to exist for younger people to exhibit that agency, and that agency is exercised within a social environment that involves self and social control, and therefore also relations of resistance or pressure that is exerted. We tried, next slide. We tried to analyze specifically what younger people we are talking about when they talked about the issues relating to the principle of critical consciousness. The principle of critical consciousness involved envisioning a good life. And in envisioning that good life, young people always express the concern of being aware of how things are and the potential for things to change and the right to change. So in their language, they talked of, in their Sheng, they talked of usalilishe. So that kind of straightedness was part of the things that agency was understood. In essence, that is nested within the situations in which the young people find themselves. But also, most importantly, it also involved an aspect of self-awareness, being aware of your internal strengths and weaknesses, and what you want to do for your life. So in that kind of awareness, individuals are able to set goals of what they want to do to achieve that good life, and the things they desire to change. So using the concept of self-consciousness, related it to another Swahili word of kujitumbwa. And then the third important aspect that I talked about in regard to self-critical consciousness is the aspect of self-worth. Having self-regard, believing in yourself, and that kind of esteem constituted an important aspect of critical consciousness and therefore one of the components of agency. So as one person indicated, so I was given a chance to tell my part of the story. And that was when I rediscovered myself and knew who I was. So I gave a better future of who I am and who I wanted to be. So exploiting the opportunities or providing opportunities where younger people are able to express who they are was one way of actually helping them to reveal their internal strengths and weaknesses, but also their aspirations in life. Next slide. Then the second concept that we talked about, the concept of self-efficacy, and this related to the confidence, having the confidence in the things that young people do or what they believed they could do. The confidence in the ability to harness the resources to convert their intentions and goals into concrete actions that would steer them towards the goals they pursue. It also involved the ability to overcome several barriers in their pursuit. So they recognized that the journey towards the desired changes involved obstacles along that path. And so having self-confidence is one of the attributes that younger people felt would help them to reach those goals. Next slide. Another aspect that young people talked about is the element of conviction. Here, in talking about the element of conviction, younger people used other related concepts of kuamua and kujikaza. That also related closely to the concepts of being determined, focused, and motivated. And so when they're talking about, for example, aspects of motivation, younger people drew on their internal energy, but also the resources around them that would actually motivate them to move towards the goals that they set. Next slide. And then we had the element of act. Now, act is the element of agency in which that reflects young people's intentions or the path between the path between intentions and the real goals or the destinations that they seek to arrive at. And so in acting, the young people talked of engaging in behaviors necessary to achieve their desired outcomes, whether these outcomes are related to SRH or health or in another aspect of life. They also talked about engaging in behaviors that span different levels of complexity and difficulty. For example, being proactive in seeking relevant information, communicating personal desires and fears with sexual partners, engaging in self-advocacy, pursuing external resources such as health or other social networks. Next slide. So in finally then, they reported about the concept of resist. The concept of resistance signaled younger people's desire and the actions that related to changing the conditions around them that actually controlled their ability to exercise agency. And so in resisting, younger people exercise self-control, but also self-discipline. So social control was one of the aspects that young people mentioned around which they mobilized their power to resist and helped them to navigate the social and the social norms and the social pressures that surround the kind of actions that they wanted to take. It also involved being innovative, creative problem-solving skills, and then the ability to envision and pursue alternatives. So in pursuing these alternatives, the young people realized that there are alternatives to what existed, and therefore, if they felt that they needed to do them, they needed to resist some social forms of control around them. So in Swahili, in the Sheng that they used, this concept, they noted the concept of kujituma or kuchangamuka, as in their local constructs, as they were referring to it. Next slide. So what we mentioned above are the key findings relating the concept of individual agency. When it came to the concept of collective agency, the young people again talked of their collective agency being reflected in terms of the ability to mobilize each other to contribute to a common goal in their communities. And so young people kind of recognized the connectedness between their personal lives and the lives of the communities, such as families and religious groups or social groups to which they belonged. And so in trying to exercise that agency, the young people also involved tactics of trying to balance individual goals and needs and expectations against or with those of their families or the social groups to which they belonged. Just like one person expressed in an FGIT, you can't be independent in every place. There's a time when you'll need support. You can't be independent. These days we are in, everything is connected. Everything is a connection. So to young people, the concept of agency also involves that kind of connectedness between the person and then the social structures that surround or in which is embedded. Next slide. So, but in trying to analyze what young people were telling us, we also recognize that there's a lot of what we regard as pluralistic ignorance or lack of critical consciousness about the potential of the collective peer group in enabling a young person to achieve the desired concept of good life. And there are also differences in the distribution of the social control mechanisms that exist between particularly the rural areas and urban and peri-urban settings. And in exercising, in revealing such issues like of pluralistic ignorance, would express young people when we would witness young people expressing statements like failing to get support from peers for carrying out a certain activity that they would like to do, and also collectively thinking that peers are a bad influence over their behaviors, and such perceptions were held among the very younger people. So we noted that such perceptions then make it difficult for people to harness the collective potential, their collective agency. Next slide. So also in terms of, next slide please first. In terms of next slide. Thank you so much. So in terms of the concept of collective agency, we noted that there are quite a number of aspects that are involved, and these aspects also involved other micro concepts. So for example, collective action that required influential joint actions in pursuit of shared goals by two or more people. It also involved the collective self, recognition of young people as a unit, and having the capacity to represent themselves as part of a collective agent. And it also involved the concept of having collective efficacy, and the collective efficacy was also reflected in terms of collaborations that inspire collective action towards shared goals, And then it also involved making recourse to social resources, social capital that existed among their communities. Such forms of social capital looked at issues of connectedness, the trust, or the shared values that held young people together. It also involved having an aspect of group confidence in achieving the shared goals, and having that confidence that they can influence joint actions and they have the capacity to claim and enforce the rights that they have. So all these different aspects were part of the things that young people expressed when also talking about the concept of collective agency. Next slide. So through their presentations, we tried to reflect on the things that young people reported were as barriers to pursuit of the concept of good life, or the things that were barriers actually to agency. And part of the things involved, for example, harmful social, gender, or group norms and expectations that put restrictions on what younger people could and could not do. They also involved issues like corruption, nepotism, or issues that generally spoke of practices of poor governance. There were also aspects of drug and alcohol abuse combined together, which resulted into issues of mental health for some of the young people who were exposed to them. They also noted equally that many times family support is rare, and so is community support, thus limiting the kind of resources that would enable younger people to move towards the goals that they wanted. But of value to note also is the aspect of bad peer pressure. The aspect of bad peer pressure was noted and is closely linked to the concept of pluralistic ignorance, when young people perceive their fellow peers as having bad pressure, implying that they cannot then rely on them as a basis for cultivating a collective action against things that, for example, constrain their pursuit of good life relating to either sexual or reproductive health or HIV prevention. And like, for instance, one female noted, when you share with someone your dreams, they discourage you. For example, when they see you going to the school, they tell you that they also went to school, but came back empty-handed. So that reflects the kind of community response to young people who are striving to unchain themselves from the things that constrain their pursuit of good life. But there were important enablers to good agency that were also noted. For example, we noted having mentors and destiny helpers. There are quite a number of people whom young people pointed to as people who were inspirations and motivators to what they wanted to be in life. And they engaged those people and they got some support in that line. Having good education and the supportive families were also considered very enabling factors, just like were issues to do with the family money or having income generating opportunities. Most younger people considered being economically independent as important, as an enabler to achieving most of the things that they thought they wanted to achieve. So they talked about also being good and faithful, say, in marriage and relationships as quite important aspects that enabled exercising agency. And they also talked about supportive networks with good peers. As illustrations to this, we have two quotations here that speak to that. One notes that, for instance, that societal demands put pressure on youth to act. This pushes many of them to travel to better opportunities so as to change their situations. So many younger people shift, for example, from rural areas to urban settings. they are trying to run away from the kind of pressures that are exerted on them in rural areas in the hope that they will find better opportunities in urban settings for them to achieve what they consider to be a good life. And then in another key informative interview, it was noted that young people who really need mentorship and confidence, they are now working towards what will change their lives, support their families. So I believe that if they are empowered, they can really do a lot. Next slide. So overall, those are the key findings that we generated from young people around the concepts of agency and in terms of individual and collective agency. But there were, however, quite a number of quite key challenges that we noted that relate to investigating the concept of agency. And these challenges relate, they are largely measurement challenges. First, it was difficult, for example, to reach universal understanding about what collective agency means, or about what agency means in general to different people. So because of that kind of subjective nature, generating a measure that then enables you to report about agency in concrete terms may become a bit difficult. There are always mainstream conversations around, for example, collective agency that is largely understood from the perspective of development practitioners that focus on formally organized entities, like formal groups that are organized to pursue formally determined goals through a set of activities that are well defined and monitored and evaluated in that kind of sense. But there are also other young people's expressions of the concept of collective agents that was actually reflective of the informal social groups in which they embedded, the family, for example, membership to a church, to a group, or to a community to which a person belongs. So there were kind of differences in how actually collective agents was understood. Two, we've also felt that we struggle with tools of quantitative measurement, which accounts for context and processes. Again, from the analysis of the findings, when you talk to young people, their concept of agency is fluid, is fluid, is dynamic, it is a processual in nature, implying that one element is connected to the next element, and a lot of things to do with the processes that may not be captured in quantitative terms, then they're likely to be missed if we are investigating the concept of collective and individual agency. Overall, those are the key findings, and we are happy to have more conversations about the same. My colleague will put more insights to what I've presented to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that insightful presentation. Could we hear from Paul?
I would like to thank my colleague Alex for that presentation, and just to note that these results from the formative study being used to develop a multimedia campaign that builds on these findings to address the different elements of agency and help younger people to develop agency in relation to sexual and reproductive health. I think, for example, we have seen a strong nexus between developing agency and social norms, because what you saw as social control mechanisms, basically these are social and gender norms that younger people have to interface as they embark on the journey to achieve agency, to, for example, clearly understand the situation where they are in terms of sexual and reproductive health issues, or even HIV prevention, HIV testing, how to navigate the stigma, for example, and discrimination related to around issues of HIV and AIDS, and seeking services and seeking care, but also trying to navigate issues of interest, like, for example, how to, in terms of collective agency, how to harness the positive peer support, rather than thinking about peers in terms of only bad peer pressure, but also to be able to understand the potential within the positive peer pressure to exercise collective agency as younger people. So we are finalizing, we have more or less finalized the formative study report. And what is coming next, using that report, we are developing a multimedia campaign that will be rolling out in phases. We have conducted a baseline study, and we are now analyzing the data. And once it is ready, we'll also share that with the members here, such that you see the journey from the formative study report, developing the intervention or the multimedia campaign, and then doing a baseline to be able to identify those indicators, measure them, and then we'll follow up with the midline and end line. So thanking you again, and I think can have questions. Aloysius, you can help us moderate any of the questions that are coming up, and we could try to answer. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Alexander, for such an insightful presentation. A couple of things that I've picked up from your presentation. I could see a broader definition around what agency is, because we include intentionality, the action bit, but also a third component around resistance. And I feel that is not, other definitions don't have a lot of focus on resistance. And it's interesting to see how you define agency in this particular project. But also the other thing that caught my eye are the enablers of agency, both collective and individual. And some of the things that you talk about is good education, good peer relation, a good peer. And I kept asking myself, what do you mean by good? And how did the young people define what good is and what good education could look like? So those are some of the things that kept in my head. But I'm opening it up to other participants in the room. If you have a question, you can raise your, is it raising your hand? And then you could just come up and speak up and ask your question. It should be brief. And I could see there are a couple of questions within the chat. We shall also read them out. But let me first give an opportunity to those so that we have a couple of questions to our presenters. Okay, as people come up, maybe we could read out a few questions from the chat. Edith, can you help me with that?
So Dr. Agaba asks that were there any gender differences between young females and young males in the way the young people exercise agency?
Okay. Should we take that on?
There is another one here. Why the focus on resistance? Why do you go beyond action to focus on resistance? Why is it important?
Okay. You let us know if you want us to respond, Aloysius.
Yeah, I think you can respond as other people come in. other questions.
Okay, can you take us back to resist such that we can speak about it? Then we will also talk about some of the gender differences that came up. Oh, you have passed it actually. There, right there. So, Aloysius, you talked of the issue of peer pressure and the negative peer pressure versus positive peer pressure. One of the things we noted that in the narratives of younger people, the issue of bad vibes from peers being a negative influence, that narrative was relatively strong. And the issue was, we were asking ourselves, isn't there positive peer pressure? And when we dug deep into this, it was a common narrative that when younger people are growing up, even when at school, the emphasis in the narrative from parents, from caregivers, from teachers, is that negative peer pressure is going to destroy you. So they rarely reflect on the positive support from peers, because in other words, the thinking was that interface with peers is likely to largely lead to negative results and outcomes and actions, rather than, so there was that missed opportunity to harness that peer support or positive peer support, which is very essential, especially when we talk about agency that is more collective, agency that goes beyond an individual, but extends to the networks that you build with the like-minded people to set and pursue similar goals and to convert those intentions in terms of goals into action. So that is sort of about bad peer influence versus missing out on the positive peer influence and support. That is really quite important. When we come to resist as one of the elements of agency, it is not necessarily that it is resistance, but it is that process you go through to navigate the challenges that you meet along the way. Let us say, in terms of self-efficacy, you have the confidence to set goals and that you anticipate to achieve these goals, but along the way, you face certain obstacles, you face certain challenges, but there are also opportunities that come along the way that you need to harness. So resist is in a way of recognizing that there are going to be challenges along the way, there are going to be barriers along the way, but you must engage in creative problem solving in order to navigate. For example, there could be negative social and gender norms along the way. If you decide that you are going to, for example, you want to embark on using contraception, maybe you want to engage in safer sexual relationships, maybe you want to have more positive empathy in relationships between boys and girls or sexual partners, but there are all these patriarchal norms that emphasize the power over, especially over from the boys against the girls. So all these issues, navigating them is a process of thinking through how along the way you harness and develop creative solutions to ensure that they don't stop you from achieving your goals, and pursuing alternatives. If one thing is not working, being innovative and creative enough to think out of the box and navigate processes. So they used to talk about kujituma and kuchangamuka, a lot sort of to emphasize how important it is to be creative. Thank you. And then in respect to gender differences, and here my colleagues can come up and help, but we recognize really issues of differentials between younger men and women in terms of aspects around gender roles, aspects around access to and control over resources, aspects around power in relationships. For example, the issue of lack of relationship empathy was quite strong among the boys in respect to how they were speaking about their experiences of relationships. All this may not be here because we only picked out a few issues to share within the time available, but one of the issues that relates to gender was that lack of relationship empathy, particularly from the side of the male youth as they were relating with the female youth. And yet, from the perspective of the female youth, would see those aspects of relationship empathy being more positive. Putting yourself in the shoes of the other party, knowing how they feel, and acting accordingly. So thank you. My colleagues could add on this.
Thank you for Alexander, do you have anything to add?
Sorry, I had been muting myself. So I think Paul has ably explained all the things that relating to that. But I think I saw one more question that was about what we understand by the concept of pluralistic self that we used when we were trying to talk about. I think when we are talking to young people, they had difficulty in defining who they are as solely individuals. When one tried, for example, to explain, when you ask one who you are, I say, I can't be myself, and I'm part of the family. The family is me. So the concept of the self itself as seen as individual, unit isolated from the social networks that within which the individual is nested, is what actually is trying to be communicated here by the concept of pluralistic self. In other words, the younger people the younger people in Kenya did not have this concept of self where they understand themselves, where one understands oneself as independent of all the family or the social support networks that are around him. So their identity itself is embedded, is both singular and plural at the same time. And that brings the concept of pluralistic self.
Thank you. And I will add to that a few things to the issue of pluralistic self, especially when you live in a collectivistic setting. This thinking of an individual who is separable and separated from the environment, who takes decisions, but without thinking about the implications of those decisions on family, peers, and the community, seemed to be relatively absent. So, and that has programming implications such that if you are thinking about individual in the context of in an African setting, in the context of these younger people in Kenya, you should look at this individual as connected with the other groups that matter to them. You may want to call these reference groups in the language of social norms, but they are those people who matter to this younger person, and as they are defining themselves, they always want to make reference to the other people who are important to them in the family, among their peers, in the community, their mentors, among others. So that is why we talk of some kind of pluralistic self, where you don't see just one self, but where the concept of self is quite dynamic, and it is in relationship with others. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We have a couple of questions in the chat. I'll read them out. From a program multimedia intervention perspective, when is the best age or most strategic segment to target and positively influence acquisition of positive norms, attitudes, and behaviors? Is it the younger or older age groups? Does it vary for boys versus girls?
This is a very interesting question. And of course, our colleagues from SUJAS, feel free to step in here. But from a social and behavior change perspective, I think it is important to think about audience segmentation. because all these groups are affected by norms, whether it is the very young adolescents, maybe 10 to 14, the older adolescents who might be 15, maybe to 19, the people we call younger people who might be maybe 18 to 24. All these segments could be, you could look at them as audiences, and you do audience segmentation and look at the influence at how norms play out within these groups. And here you might also be introducing in some aspects of intersectionality, saying, even when I'm saying I'm grouping these adolescents into the very young adolescents, the older adolescents, the married adolescents, the unmarried adolescents, I have to think of the heterogeneity within these groups of adolescents. Even if I'm a very young adolescent, I could be from a rural area, I could be living in a slum, I could be living in a high-scale urban setting, and I could be having parents from a certain level of class. It could be issues of ethnicity, race. So it is quite complex, but I think you need to think about all these as you segment your audiences and then design campaign messages that resonate to the context and to the norms and to the intersections between norms and other factors that influence these youth in terms of exercising agency to challenge existing harmful norms. So it is quite complex, but it requires audience segmentation because every age has its own unique needs, challenges. They said each stage might have a different set of goals, and they might be experiencing different challenges that they need to deal with as they set their goals and pursue to achieve these goals, whether they are for sexual and reproductive health, menstrual hygiene management, or even staying in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. There is another one. So in your presentation, both Alex and yours, as you presented, you have focused on the issue of norms and how it could curtail individual collective agency. Now the question is, any ideas on who the key norm holders are and whether or how they should be integrated into the media programs or interventions?
Okay, that the question on norms is really very interesting. And of course, we have to get in here with the understanding, of course, of the different norms that operate in different groups, and that the holders of these norms, whether these descriptive norms that emphasize what you believe others do, or injunctive norms that focus on what you believe others approve or disapprove of. And the reference groups also could vary depending on the type of norm and the social sanctions that go with that norm. Because when we talk of an injunctive norm or a descriptive norm, the strengths of the norm are determined by the severity of the social sanctions that sustain that norm. So, but generally speaking, if we are talking about norm holders or custodians of norms, the reference groups are people whose opinion matters, who are important, people whom they think about as they are making decisions to challenge norms or to engage in social norm change, as they are thinking through what they think about their actions and decisions that might involve, of course, exercising their agency when they develop the political consciousness or the self-efficacy, and they say, now I have this confidence, I'm going to do this. But then as they are trying out things, they experience backlash, they experience social sanctions. And so the issue is really to figure out, to identify these reference groups, and maybe engage with them in the change process, particularly to create a supportive environment for all adopters of new norms. So I'm not sure if I have answered that question appropriately, but when you think in terms of norms, you must think about the types of norms, you must think about the reference groups, you must think about the social sanctions, you must think about the exceptions as you design your campaign to address the harmful social norms, but maybe also to harness the positive social norms. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Maybe just a question to you. Since you have within your formative research, there is evidence that the norms are influencing individual and collective agency. As a project, are you planning to do a social norm diagnosis to try and find out how the norms really influence and the reference groups and the sanctions? Because I feel this is very important for this project.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. For example, we already started to do this within the formative study, but we are deepening it as we do the baseline, and part of our baseline has engaged in social norms diagnosis, where we are applying, especially we are using vignettes in our particularly in our qualitative tools, to be able to explore norms. Vignettes basically are short stories that and in developing them, you make sure that they resonate with the context and the audiences where you are going to apply them. And using these vignettes, we ask questions that explore the descriptive norms, the injunctive norms, the reference groups, the social sanctions, the exceptions. So the answer is yes, and we are using these, what we are learning, to further inform our campaign, because our campaign is dynamic and it is phased. So whatever we are learning from the social norms diagnosis, using especially the social norms exploration tools, is helping us to further improve and inform our campaign. Thank you.
Yes, Alex, go ahead. Alexander, you were saying something?
Oh, no, sorry. No, sorry. I think you did it. Sorry about that. I'll just, I think to have somebody have sites here.
Okay, could we have one more question and we wind up this discussion? Okay, I guess we have exhausted the questions. Thank you so much for, thank you, Paul and Alexander, for such an insightful presentation on collective and individual agency. I have quite a number of things that I've picked from your presentation, a lot of clarity about what agency is, yeah? And I hope also the other participants have got the similar information around that, understanding around that. Okay. Thank you so much for that. The ELC organizes such presentations every month, so be on the lookout for other presentations that we shall have within the chat. My colleague has posted links to our social media sites, but also a registration link where you could register as an individual member, but as also as an organization. So I believe there are two different links there. One where you could register as an individual, but also as an organization. There's so many benefits for being a member of the ELC. We shall have that conversation when you register with us. We usually have those one-on-one conversations to bring more clarity on the benefits of being a member of the ELC. But also we have, for our ELC current members, we have an annual survey that is running. Also, my colleague has posted the link within the chat. Kindly follow that if you haven't filled that survey. Your feedback is very essential for our work, but also our existence as the ELC, because we can only exist if we have members, yeah? And we can also our membership can only grow if we hear from our members. So filling the annual survey is also very, very important. But also we have 2 calls running. So we are currently documenting the positive social norms across the different Eastern Africa countries. So if you have a short story, if you have a photo, if you have a video that shows the positive social norms within the East African region, you could also reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining us today afternoon, morning or evening, depending on where you are. Yeah. We really value your participation in such engagements, and we look forward to hosting you yet again. Please be on the lookout. We shall share the video recording, but also the PowerPoint presentation on your email. Thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on where you are.
Thank you so much, Aloysius and team. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, presenters and everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.